The dates and locations will soon be announced through the project website. More information is available on the project website. That's FloridaTransportationPlan.com. Latest events or documents will be posted out on the site. The Comments tab allows people to submit comments at any time or request to be added to our project email list. You can also request a presentation to a community group. We encourage you to join the conversation at FloridaTransportationPlan.com. This concludes our presentation. Thank you for your time. And remember, alert today, alive tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for your time. And again, the website is www.floridatransportationplan.com. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Was there any board members who'd like to make a comment? Okay. All right, then we'll move on. Yeah, I actually wrote that down. It looked like in 2005 they had a 2025 plan, and then in 2010 we jumped up to 2060. So interesting. I know we do a 10-year plan, and things change from year to year with that. So, Ms. Shanahan?
I do have a question. Who was on the FTP? I saw there were members. I mean, is there somebody on the county commission, or somebody from HART, or is there a regional member, or who's the membership?
And I apologize with your name. Did you have do you know who's on in the Tampa area? Is there anyone on any of those steering committees or any groups represented in the Tampa region? Other than District 7?
Well, in District 7 it's Lee Royal. Basically, you can contact her. That is basically her phone number,
right.
As well, her email, and she will have more information about the steering committee as well as any other meetings.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, let's move in. We've got a overview of proposed Metro Rapid Corridors presentation by HART Senior Planner Justin Begley. Welcome.
That's it. Okay. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Justin Begley. I'm Senior Planner with HART, and I'm up here this morning to briefly talk to you about our Metro Rapid program, which is our bus rapid transit service we provide. This project, or this presentation, is intended to be a bit of background, accompanied by the planned future of the Metro Rapid routes, as well as some details about cost and distance and where these routes are intended to go. So to kick us off, I just want to rewind a little bit and go back about 10 years. Really where the Metro Rapid program originated was in something called a Transit Emphasis Corridor Study, which in 2005 looked at 7 corridors throughout the county as candidates not necessarily for bus rapid transit, but for improvements. And improvements meaning things like bus shelter upgrades, transit signal priority, improved shelters, bus bays. These are corridors that have a lot of transit orientation to them that we provide service to, and we get ridership from these corridors for the most part. But we wanted to look at them in more detail as how to prioritize improvements. And through that process, there were 7 corridors identified at the outset. They included Nebraska Avenue, Hillsborough Avenue, Florida, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, Bruce B. Downs, the Selman, and those corridors were evaluated. It was largely a data collection effort, and those corridors were looked at for improvements. Fast forward a couple years into 2008, and is really what this slide is talking about. That slide was a bit of background, or I'm sorry, that project was a bit of background. This project was better defining of what these routes would look like as bus rapid transit. So the Transit Emphasis Corridor Study, it reduced the Bruce B. Downs and the Selman corridors as not meeting the requisite requirements to be good candidates for bus rapid transit. But instead, it refined it down to the 5 corridors I first mentioned, And in those corridors, they evaluated them against each other, specifically for the bullets here on the slide, and they include population and employment that were within walking distance of the corridor. Major destinations served by the corridor, that was a heavy criteria in the definition of what that would ultimately be prioritized. Ridership of the current routes serving these corridors, and for instance, Bruce B. Downs didn't make it, we didn't have service out there. It's one reason it wasn't considered. And then finally, the costs to build it, the connections with other services, other routes, and then the feasibility of construction. Could we build on these corridors to provide bus rapid transit? And then finally, mentioning outcomes here, what we ended up with was a north-south and an east-west pair that were highest ranking based on those criteria. And the north-south was the first to be constructed. That actually went in operation in 2013, as you're probably aware. An east-west corridor was also identified as a good candidate for construction. And that one currently is in 30% engineering of development of that corridor. So the map I have up here is a look at the north-south Metro Rapid that went in operation in 2013. It was funded for construction largely through community investment tax bond the county provided. This Metro Rapid is largely consists of Fletcher Avenue, Nebraska Avenue into downtown. It has a regional park and ride at the one end. It runs at a 15-minute frequency throughout the day for about 15 hours a day. And 30 minutes out to USF and the Hidden River Park and Ride, 300-space park and ride. You also see at the bottom of this, there's the specialized shelters that were developed for the Metro Rapid. They're also accompanied by branded and styled buses that are specifically identified only for Metro Rapid service. So that's a bit of background to get us where we are today. I did want to bring up a little bit about the Go Hillsborough outreach that's going on right now, because bus rapid transit is a component of that. To draw a little bit of distinction about the bus rapid transit that we operate and have planned here versus what Go Hillsborough is discussing in terms of bus rapid transit. There is a bit of a difference. So HART's bus rapid transit is defined as a mixed traffic BRT. We use traffic signal priority, which is a preferential treatment at intersections to move our buses more quickly through the corridors as our way of gaining travel time speed through the route, as well as stopping less frequency with less frequency. The line we've constructed here at the bottom is was $1.43 million per mile. I believe it was an 18-mile corridor, came in about $25 million for construction. The routes we have planned that I'll be getting into in a little bit, they range anywhere from 1.2 to 2.1 million, but so they're all generally very similar. If you were to attend, which I'm sure most of you have, I've seen some of you there, the Go Hillsborough meetings, you'll see on the right a description of bus rapid transit as presented to the public and what they're gaining input on. This is one of the more recent meetings they have. So they've got bus rapid transit is described here as a dedicated travel lane with transit signal priority. It includes does not include the right-of-way cost to build it. Those systems come in significantly higher in cost. They're about $50 or so million per mile, and that's largely related to the construction cost of a travel lane. And just to give a little bit of illustration of this, there was a bus rapid transit line that just went into operation about a month ago up in the Northeast. It was a 9.4 mile BRT line, and that service came in at around $570 million for 9 miles of BRT. But I'm sorry, $570 million, yes. So I just want to be sure, when we talk about BRT at HART and what we have built and what we have planned versus, what Go Hillsborough is reaching out with, we just understand the differences a little bit about that travel lane, because that's really the cost driver. Okay, so in our transit development plan, which we update every year, we do a major update every 5 years. We have a status quo and a vision plan, and the status quo plan largely consists of what we intend to do over the next 10 years with our current revenue streams and our current fleet and facilities for the most part. The vision plan consists of what we could do or what we would like to do based on need in the county for additional service beyond that. And the Metro Rapid routes are all reside in the vision plan. We don't currently have any Metro Rapid BRT service in our status quo. So this map is an overview, and I apologize if it's a little hard to see, but the Metro Rapid lines that reside in our vision plan are largely north, south, and east-west corridors that intend to move people quickly from ends of the county, from one end to the other, with opportunities to transfer on the routes.
And just to interject quickly, since this is at such a large font, we do have at each of your seats paper copies of the overall map and then the detailed information per corridor. Thank you, Justin.
Sure. So just as an overview, what we've got here are the 6 identified BRT routes that are planned yet not built. They begin with the east-west corridor that I talked about earlier that came out of the 2008 plan. That's at 30% engineering. There was a Dale Mabry Highway to MacDill Air Force Base line, a new Tampa line, a Brandon line, a Kennedy Boulevard to TIA line, and a Gun Highway and Bush Boulevard line. I'm going to take you briefly through each of those to just describe them a little bit, talk about what they serve and what they're going to cost. So the east-west line was the first one I mentioned, and that is a line that's been, it was conceived quite a while ago. It's been in development for many years with some slight alterations, but it's largely, again, an east-west corridor to complement the north-south BRT, so we have ways for people to get from the various corners of the county or service area from one end to the other. This line originates over in Temple Terrace and over near Arnett Park Transfer Center in order to serve a number of routes and take feeder ridership from the East County area that goes to Net Park, be able to get those people to the airport. It also makes intersections with several of the other Metro Rapids that I mentioned, and ultimately will serve the FDOT Intermodal Center that's planned for the West Shore area, and then TIA as well. A little bit about cost and number of vehicles required to operate. That's one of the longer BRTs we have planned, so almost 18 miles. That's going to take a number of vehicles to operate at the 10-minute frequency that's required to keep the high level of service on BRT. And we project that the construction costs are in the neighborhood of $20 to $22 million. The next line is the Kennedy Boulevard to TIA line. That line is a bit shorter. It originates downtown at our Marion Transit Transfer Center, primarily serves the area west of downtown via Kennedy Boulevard, makes a number of stops along these lines, would again link up with the Intermodal Center and then ultimately terminate at the Tampa International Airport. That line's less than half of the distance to the east-west, as you can imagine. It picks up in the middle of the route, ends up at TIA. Still a bit of cost associated with that one due to the Kennedy's a bit costlier avenue. It's a bit more built out, and the cost of land acquisition required to build some shelters is projected to be a bit higher.
So these numbers you're quoting all include a right-of-way. Is that correct?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
And again, they are estimates to our best ability without a lot of having funded a lot of studying to exactly what it would cost. This is our best guess at this time. New Tampa is the first of the north-south routes that are planned but not built. This would originate just north of the county line up at a connection at a park and ride with Pasco County's transit service. Pasco County actually has their own BRT that they've conceived to operate east-west through the county and deliver people over to the Port Richey area. And the eastern terminus would be here and meet up with this route. We also intend to pick up some local ridership in that area and take the Bruce B. Downs corridor down to the University Area Transit Center, USF area, the VA hospital area. Again, a little bit shorter of a route as it just operates on the one corridor. We can do 10-minute frequency with a few less vehicles, and the construction costs on this one come in just under $15 million. Next, we have Brandon. Brandon is a service that we have conceived to originate at our Dover Park and Ride facility, where we currently have probably one of our biggest park and rides, particularly in the Brandon area, where we're currently serving people with an express service, but this could drop some people off along the way on State Road 60, and ultimately it would get on the crosstown and really pick up some speed to get people downtown and connect with all the services downtown. That one's not quite 18 miles, a little bit lower on the estimated cost to construct. As you can see, they're all somewhat in the same neighborhood. These costs would largely be refined through better study, but this is what we estimate it would be. The second to last is the Dale Mabry Highway corridor. This one covers a little bit of territory we don't currently serve, so we would like to get all the way north on Dale Mabry up in the Lutz area. Again, connect with that Pasco County service, but then start to develop ridership a bit more on the Dale Mabry corridor, which is a little bit tougher to serve at times. It's not necessarily a great walk-up facility, but we figure we can connect with a lot of transit services that are currently operating here. It would connect with the East-West Metro Rapid as well as the Kennedy, and then ultimately bring people to McDill. This is the longest of the planned corridors. It is 22 miles. It's the costliest as well. It's going to be nearly $40 million to construct this one. But there's a lot of service here, so this one is also on the books for an out year. Finally, I just want to talk about the Gun Highway to Bush and Bush Boulevard corridor. This is one that emerged a bit later in the development process. It starts out at the Northwest Transfer Center, where it makes a number of connections out in Northwest County. We'll take Gun Highway, intersect with a number of Metro Rapids, and ultimately terminate at the Net Park transfer facility. And this one is, again, it's 18 miles, about 30 million, kind of costs and distance in the middle of the pack with all the other planned services here. So, so this really wraps up the presentation. I do want to leave you with this slide, and again, I hope you have a copy of this one in front of you because it's a bit hard to read. What we did is to take each of the 6 routes and to look at. I don't know if I can make it any bigger. We took each of the 6 routes and we pulled some important measures. I guess that really didn't help, but I'll read them and hopefully I can communicate what's in here. So the routes in the order I just presented are across the top in these columns, and on the column to the left we have 4 measures. First is an annual projected ridership. The second is a projected operating cost. The third is a cost per passenger, which is merely a division of ridership into cost, so we understand what the cost to provide the services per passenger. And then finally is an estimation of the build cost per mile, which is basically just taking the estimated construction costs from the earlier slides and dividing them by the number of miles. And what you see is they're basically the East-West and the Kennedy Boulevard are anticipated at their peak to come in around 1 million riders a year. That tends to taper off with the remaining routes, with the other, New Tampa generally performing the lowest, Brandon, Dale Mabry, and Gunn all generally performing similarly with ridership. Operating costs, the Dale Mabry and Gunn highway lines are the most costly to operate, whereas the shorter lines like the New Tampa and the Kennedy are a bit more affordable. When you look at cost per mile, the East-West and the Kennedy stand out a little bit as being some of the more low cost per mile to operate. And the remaining 4 routes cost a bit more, particularly when you factor in the number of people they're projected to serve. And then finally, the build cost per mile is really the Brandon and the New Tampa are projected to be relatively low cost per mile to construct based on the availability of right-of-way and the length of the route. That really wraps up what I came up here to talk to you about today. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any about the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Very informative presentation. I did not see any of this at the Go Hillsborough. I think this is fantastic information that you want to respond to that?
Yes, thank you. So the information here is in the maps, the vision plan maps, which Go Hillsborough has, but again, they've been focusing more on this broad idea of what should be going on with transit and transportation. In my CEO report, I'll do a little more conversation of how these corridors come together with what that work is doing and how you'll see that at both the PLG meetings and going forward.
And I might even add that maybe at a PLG meeting that this would. Do you have a comment?
I do.
Turn it off.
Not a correct statement that we are broader.
Okay.
We have people at these meetings, you probably will say, that will tell you, they'll sit down at the map, and their comment cards reflect this, that tell you exactly where they want the routes to go, where they want the improvements. It's very I think it's much more specific than what we've ever done. If the broadness is because we're reaching out to the county, and I think that's where that comes in. But I do think this was a very good presentation. My concerns, I guess, is the statement that they made, what Go Hillsborough is promoting is different from what HART is promoting, which is true. But I think it's time to wake up. We need to start speaking with one voice. This is it. This is the time. We got to intersect and connect to Go Hillsborough. We should not, this should be a presentation, very good, but it should go another step to say, and here is what Go Hillsborough's plan is, and here how this fits into it. And you know, I think it's good. I think that this is where we can really start to show some leadership in HART. I'd like to see what ridership numbers support the Metro Rapid going down, starting at Hillsborough Avenue, going to the airport. And I guess the other question would be, is Metro Rapid going down Kennedy? There's so much traffic on Kennedy, just like Nebraska. I don't know how much more improvement you can make on that, but I think the intersection and connection to the transportation plan that the county is coming up with is really critically important right now. We're reaching a point where everything we're talking about at HART should be molded into what Parsons Brinckerhoff is working in developing this plan, because if we're going to go about it in silos and in isolation, I don't think we're going to get too far, because the money that we're going to spend will be for projects on that transportation list, and these will be outside the list, which means where are we going to get the money to be able to afford all these lines? So I would like to see us really make a concerted effort, probably sitting down with Parsons. I think you and Catherine and your team should go sit down with them, talk about Metro Rapid. It does fit into the plan. Metro Rapid fits in, but where does it fit in? And where does BRT fit in? Long-term, long-range planning. But I definitely think we have to start speaking with one voice. We're past trying to do this on our own. And the last comment, nothing for South County out of here. Nothing. And I am a broken record on this. Coming on 5 years. And if you go to the Go Hillsborough comments, I'm going to tell you right now, bus service #1 problem in South County.
Okay, a lot of
Thank you.
hands raised. I did see Ms. Shanahan early on. Did you still have comments? And then I'm going to go down the line. I see Commissioner White and Commissioner Miller. And then we're going to go to Commissioner Vance and Director Melendez.
I mean, the tagline out of this is 1.4, I guess my total was 94.7 miles for $143 million is what the total. I don't know what the priorities are in this bus coverage in terms of additional lines, because it's not prioritized. I did ask, my other question was South County, like there's nothing going south, and that's where the population growth is happening with the big Amazon center and all the other stuff that's happening down there. But one other point is the tagline out of this, which goes to what Commissioner Merman just said. To come up and say we're $1.43 million a mile versus $54 million for Go Hillsborough, I don't think is a team member's approach, because that's the tagline then that goes out of this is, Go Hillsborough's promoting this $54 million a mile project or answer, and we have a $1.43 million mile. And that, Sandy said it, and I would just like to reiterate it, that we have transportation issues, We all have areas of service and jurisdictional responsibility, and we should be working in an integrated fashion to maximize the impact for the bus riders and the people that need to be moved, and do it in a way that's cohesive and collegial, you know, hopefully with the sense of the dollars that we have to spend and maximize the impact based on priorities. So I would like to know what the priorities of these routes are in terms of if somebody said you have, you know, $20 million, how would you spend it? And then I think we need to have a strategy as where does the money come from?
Ms. Egan, did you want to address the schedule? Is that not in the TDP?
The corridors are in the TDP, essentially in the order that we have presented them, but is Gun Highway last in the TDP, Justin, or I believe Gun Highway is last?
Yes, it is. They were presented in the order that they're in the TDP. Basically, they're programmed one after another in consecutive
Like 1 or 2
years.
each year, if I'm not mistaken. Is that?
More, one year and then maybe 2 years farther out. And the ranking, I know this question has come up previously, the north, south, and east, west were ranked based on ridership, and the board back in 2008 adopted these with resolutions of top 2 corridors. Past east, west, the rest of these were ranked in various work sessions in 2011, included in the TDP, and brought to the board for full consideration as part of the TDP, but not as a separate strategy discussion. And when we are talking about integrating this with Go Hillsborough, let me talk more about that. I think we have an answer after we have the rest of the comment.
Okay.
And I'll hold on for that.
Okay, all right. And next, I have Commissioner White. Recognize.
Well, ditto to the comments about, you know, working in collaboration and enhancing dialogue. I know that HART staff is already maintaining dialogue with PLG, but I would like to ask that HART staff enhance the dialogue with the PLG. Otherwise, you know, if we're working in parallel, we're going to have a lot of waste in the implementation and planning process for a transportation plan. With respect to Brandon Metro Rapid, I'm not sure how far along we are in that process, but I would like to ask that staff at least look at the feasibility of Bloomingdale Avenue as a corridor linking up with the crosstown, the expressway. And I know that's somewhat of an obstacle, but my gut tells me that we could do that potentially for a lower cost. So I would like the experts to at least take a look at the feasibility of that and see if my gut's right on the cost issue. And I plan to ask MPO to study that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Miller.
Can you go back to one of your first slides? Can you start from the beginning?
Anyone getting dizzy yet?
I know.
Just don't look while I do it. All right.
We'll bring you Dramamine for next time.
Right there.
Right there.
Come back.
Okay.
HART versus Go Hillsborough Outreach. That sounds like competition. Sounds like we're competing against each other. That should not even be there. Commissioner Merman and everyone else is headed right. We should be working together with the PLG, not versus. It sounds like we're on a football game or a basketball game. I think that should be taken out. I think that I'm asking and encouraging that you sit down with our consultant with PLG and try to work something out. I think this presentation probably should have been done to the PLG a long time ago.
Would
Ms. Egan?
any of our commissioners like to recommend that? I can reach out to the county administrator, but he listens much faster to.
Next meeting,
Yes, ma'am.
need to be there. Absolutely. This
Yeah.
has to be done
It's
at
got to
the
be done.
next
And
meeting.
please,
This
please
slide
do,
not in there.
please do not show this
Yeah,
slide. But it's
edited.
Actually, I'm
yeah.
sending I was typing to Mike Merrill right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Presentation for PLG.
And-
That has
and-
to go.
And while we're on the slide, the intent of our slide was to try to show that Metro Rapid is this level of technology, and a full-fledged BRT has a different price point, and we didn't catch that. So we'll work on a way of talking with Go Hillsborough, but I'll come back to those after everybody else has commented.
And I do want to say I did see this slide, this very first map, as one of the boards at some of the Go Hillsborough. So I think it was out there, but maybe perhaps the distinction between this BRT concept versus the other was not clear. Okay, thank you, Councilman. Councilman Vance.
Yes. Couple questions. Could you tell me if there were other considerations? For example, maybe South Hillsborough. Were there other ones that have just maybe are further out and they're not that far along in the consideration? And I'm interpreting that if we wish to rearrange the priority of these, that's something we need to discuss and decide if something else needs to be moved further up the ladder. Additionally, I don't have the TDP in front of me, but I believe we have had discussions maybe about tying in the circulars to connect them
Yes, sir.
with some of these access points to where they would be able to, maybe the BRT doesn't necessarily go to every, obviously it won't go to every route, but maybe the circular can connect the BRT, is my understanding, to where we can get maybe Bloomingdale involved, or we rearrange 60 to Bloomingdale, whatever, and then tie a circular along that way. But I believe that's what I recall seeing in the TDP. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. What we'll do is go back and check for all the corridors which were evaluated. The ones which were captured in the TDP had the lowest cost per passengers, and they had the lowest the lowest capital cost of construction per mile. But we'll go back and check our 08 and 11 notes so we can say which corridors were there. Again, the world has moved in the past 4 years, so it's an appropriate time to say, as Commissioner White did, please look at this corridor again, please evaluate this area. Why is there not a BRT in South County with the work that is going on there? So it's a good time for us to refresh that. And I believe we can get a map that takes the proposed corridors, as you see today, and ties them in with the map that came out with 2 weeklies ago of where the circulator zones were proposed and the flex zones, of just what's in the TDP now. And again, that's the starting point for where we can go forward in the conversation. So we'll get that map out ideally this week.
Thank
The
you.
Metro Rapid plus the circulators, and then also what other corridors were evaluated.
Okay, Director Melendez.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. Thank you all for the great comments, and thank you for a great presentation. At the last board meeting, I intimated that I was going to provide some written comment. I never did that, and so I've kind of, chewed on it since that time, and I think this is a good time to kind of tie it all together with this presentation and what's been brought up. And I really want to kind of take us to the, kind of cruising altitude, if you will, because I attended the Go Hillsborough event in my community. I'm a Hillsborough County resident. It was up at the Northwest Public Library on Countryway. So I got a chance to see firsthand, what was presented. And I will tell you, the feedback that I gave the folks there, I really thought they did a good job. I personally have been involved myself in public meetings. I've been, the person responsible for communicating with the public, both verbally and with supporting documentation. They did a great job. I really want to hand it to them. That being said, a couple notes. And I heard this term used once. I was trying to build consensus on a project, trying to get approval for a project, and I heard the term rational nexus used. I think we're all familiar with that. Two things that I see here would be the idea of rational nexus or nexi in both funding and connectivity. So remember, this is all on the vision plan, and I think, and I agree with everyone, yes, we need to assert ourselves into, back into the PLG where they're reaching this point where everything's being articulated quite well, and now comes decision time, now comes clarification time. And I think I agree with Commissioner Merman. This is the time to say what our priorities are, what we want to do. And I just want to bring up two kind of, the Harry Potter invisibility cloak, the elephant and the gorilla in the room would be, because again, I'm looking at this multitude of boards at the library, and on one little line was the possibility of rail. And I bring that up only because if that's the elephant in the room that we're kind of not talking about, the gorilla in the room would be preservation, roadway maintenance. And I think, and I'm saying this with commissioners in the room as a resident, I really want to see us as a board articulate our priorities and again, in the vision plan. But it's so important to have a rational nexus with both funding and connectivity, with what the city wants to do and what the county wants to do, and DOT, and what's feasible. So I appreciate letting me offer this because it is important. I think it is time to do that. And if it pleases the board, if I can go and attend anything and help facilitate conversation, let me know, and I will make time if I can. But I do think it is go time right now, and I do want to thank Catherine and her staff for articulating this. I think it's great. Thank you.
We have Commissioner Beckner next.
Thank you. And could we get a copy of the complete presentation as well electronically? Because this is missing not only the operational side of thing, but there's a lot of slides that were not present in your presentation. If you could send that to Catherine, and Catherine, if you could get that out to us, that would be appreciated.
What you will end up receiving from us is a link to go to the presentation on Prezi, so you'll have all the information, and we'll also see what we can do to paginate it, make it a little easier to print out.
All right.
So Lena, I think, is working that right now.
And just in consensus with the other comments, I mean, this does need to be tied into one transportation plan. I mean, we cannot go down this road again where we're throwing out and comparing two different plans. That's part of the rationale and the reason why things got derailed in 2010 is because we had competing plans that were out there and it just confused the public. And not to mention, I just went through and did a quick calculation. I mean, you were looking at just the capital cost alone at over 143 million if you were wanting to do all these projects, and that has to be tied into some type of a funding source. And without a funding source, this plan is just a pipe dream and would take years upon years to get accomplished. So that's why it's so important. We've got to be able to tie this into an appropriate funding source along with what the PLG group is planning.
Any other comments? Oh, well, I would like to make a comment real quick, and then I'll go back for clarifications. This was just on the Metro Rapid, and I believe the TDP is a broader plan that includes circulators, it includes new flex service, there's a lot more to it. But just looking at, we're of the same mind, I did the same thing, I calculated 145 million for 80 miles. And I think that's a great comparison tool to look at. He mentioned the 571 mile more higher level BRT with the dedicated lanes for just 9 miles. And we've got here 80 miles worth of BRT. And what ours has that I really like about the Metro Rapid system is the traffic signal priority. So that if it's running 10-15 minutes in traffic in the morning during peak period and it comes up to a red light, it can transmit the light to go green, and it benefits everybody in traffic. So to me, that's more of a congestion relief than maybe just the standard, a higher level BRT. So that's why I'm a big fan of this. So I would like to see the maybe the whole TDP present, and I believe CEO Hale did that early on in one of the very first PLG meetings, but I don't think it was quite a oral presentation like this. Which
It was November 2013.
Okay, yeah, I think
Second day of maternity
I
leave.
think it's time to have it back. You had a follow-up?
Yes, I just, and Commissioner White said this, there is so much need in areas of our community that are growing fast. And, I think we need to go back and reprioritize, like Commissioner Vance said. And see how it connects with the other systems in the transportation plan. Because if these routes don't connect with something that gets you to a highway or a faster route like the expressway, I think we're just gonna have just a little bit faster bus service. I can see Metro Rapid going down Hillsborough Avenue. The cars are backed up almost to the next light. Signalization can only do so much. You can press the button and turn green, but still that traffic's not gonna all be able to move through till the light turns red again. I've seen it because I've traveled down Nebraska where it's backed up when it gets to Hillsborough. So, I've been famous for calling this the Metro Not So Rapid, but I want to make it rapid. And if BRT and Metro Rapid need to work together, then I guess, getting back to connectivity, but please, I am asking staff, look at 41, look at 301, look at Big Bend, look at Bloomingdale. These South County roads need help. And every single comment sheet, you're gonna see requests for, and the circulators, does a circulator connect to these routes? like he said. So I think we've got to look at this a little more comprehensively. I think the persons can help you do that and help it fit into the pieces of the puzzle that are already there for the transportation plan they're building.
Okay, did you want to respond?
Okay, any other comments? Okay, so the PLG will receive an update in June, and it's the first blush of the PB plan. That is going to lay the groundwork for what a firm, finalized plan would end up looking like. Our current schedule was to do a big update on our TDP next year. If we wait until next year, we're clearly going to miss the boat. So with the board's approval and the planning staff's indulgence that we'll be busy, let's go ahead and move our TDP update, the big outreach, to coincide here right now with the PLG plan. So what comes forward to the PLG in June, as that kicks off, we really anchor onto that, and what comes forward is our TDP update. So we're sitting in the meetings with the same data set. It gets us working closer with PB, but then we don't miss this. So any modifications that are coming up from board's preference on Metro Rapid corridors can be wrapped in. It's exactly what will be in the PLG plan. And what I'm hearing is that ideally what you're seeing in the TDP vision plan is the exact thing, which is the bus component in the PLG plan. Am I hearing that correctly? I'm thinking that's what the goal is for us. Now our status quo plan is going to be it will be small. It does not keep up with demand. It's the status quo. So what we'll do is for this year, we'll replace the vision plan with a component that turns into, and it will be the same thing as a PLG's plan. It'll be how Metro Rapid is tying into the circulators, how we're finding ways to expand down in South County, and also out in East County, in these parts of the county that there is no service. As you remarked previously, it's hard to say what service is like when there's nothing out there. So let us go back and look at our schedules, and we'll accelerate the update of the TDP. So that puts HART in the position where we are driving the bus plan, but we're hand in hand with PB. We did meet with them Friday. We'll get back to the drawing table with them. One issue that will pop up on this is these fixed guideway corridors that are coming up in the PLG conversation. There is not time to roll them substantially into our TDP. But I've also not heard from our board that there is a strong desire to try to put something like a rail or a very expensive corridor in here. And again, there's not time to do that properly. So what you have from a TDP will be our local routes, a big expansion on express routes, what we're hearing for that, park and rides, clarification on Metro Rapid and how this ties together to those corridors which are being identified. And it will be one plan. Am I going down the right way? Is this getting closer to what the board is looking for?
Any comments? I agree.
But if the bottom line is, if we don't have the money,
Is a vision plan, yes, ma'am.
nothing happens.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes, Director Melendez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since Catherine just brought up, priorities and big, like larger, more expensive transit options, I think that's so fried. It's not even on for me. It's not even on the radar screen. It's not even in my vision.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to note that.
Okay.
It's for me, it's BRT.
Right.
Stops there.
Metro. Okay, thank you. Okay, very good discussion. I think we'll move on then to action items. We have A through D. I believe they've all gone through the committee process. So I can entertain a motion for A through D unless one wants one pulled for discussion. Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we are to the chair report. Again, Councilman Suarez, his apologies, he was unable to make it. This time I got a little bit more notice. The only thing that he had on here was we need to appoint an ad hoc committee for the CEO evaluation criteria. So Councilman Suarez will make that, but is there anyone here in the meeting who would like to volunteer before he volunteers you to be on that subcommittee? Maybe 3 people? Okay, Commissioner Miller and Councilman Vance, and that's a good start. Okay, so we have 2, and we'll maybe translate that to Councilman Suarez. And I'll turn it over to Catherine with the CEO report.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. You'll see in your board packet under tab 3, response to outstanding requests from board members. From some of these are from the previous board meetings. There was an update. Verbally, these have been given also at the board meetings on vacancies and attrition in our maintenance department, the status of any property which is owned by HART or which is leased by HART, and a few other pieces of responses. So just wanted to point those out to you. I'll go ahead and start with the PLG because I think we have covered that pretty substantially. Again, the next official meeting of the PLG is June 11th. We will now be working with county administrator staff to make sure that we're sharing our Metro Rapid information, and we will have an update for you by the next board meeting of the accelerated schedule we're going to use for our TDP outreach, which ideally it will be Go Hillsborough / HART TDP, however we have to blanket it so we can get that outreach and pull that together. We'll have more of an update then. On your list, we have a Tiger Grant pre-application. This year's Tiger Grant application process is broken into 2 steps. First is a small pre-application going up for consideration. If the FTA decides that they like the pre-application, then they will contact an agency within 2 weeks and request a full application. HART is sending forward a pre-application for the Regional Farebox program. We sent this in close of business on Friday, and we will get a text copy of that out to the board this week. Again, it's very small. It's just saying, hey, please consider us. The application is small. The dollar amount is not. We requested the full $10 million on Farebox, which are not currently funded by FDOT and TBARDA. If this full amount were to come forward, this would free up capital dollars that HART and PSTA were allocating to Farebox and allow us to accelerate some of our capital improvements. Neither the City of Tampa nor PSTA are submitting Tiger Grant applications this year, which cuts down on some of our community competition.
Can I ask a question to
Yes,
that? Last year, we submitted the Marion Street Transit.
We did.
What's the status of that, and how does that play with if we're putting in a new application?
When it was not funded last year, as far as the
It's
FTA
a
is
done
concerned,
deal
it is done.
Okay,
and,
so it's a-
yes.
okay,
And
got it,
again, with the
done deal.
PLG conversation, I would be very reluctant to start talking about moving things on the transitway ahead of something which we know is a dedicated regional need that we've put so much homework into. So we'll be bringing back the full application for your consideration at the June 1st board meeting if we are vetted through the first level of the approval process. Second item on my list is the update on 2015 pilot programs. You may have read an article in the Business Journal a few weeks ago talking a little bit about our pilot programs. It listed the entities that we've spoken to, and point of clarification, we will take out solicitations for 2 programs this summer. One is focused on our ADA/paratransit need, and this would be a taxi voucher program with multiple taxi agencies that would be offering folks a different way to go home than just traveling with HART Paratransit. A separate solicitation will go out for a first mile, last mile focused solution. And we are a public agency with a very transparent procurement process. Anyone who meets our requirements can compete. So any entity which shows that they can provide this service and meet our insurance and our technical requirements can bid. We have reached out to a lot of providers nationwide: LEAP, Bridge, First Transit, TransDev, MV. You had a presentation from Metro B, and we have also reached out to Uber and Lyft because in different markets they're providing a service similar to what we're looking for. Just want to clarify that any service which we contract on will be under Section 163 of State Code. It's a public transportation service, flat fare, open door, regular schedule anchored into the transit network. So if Uber and Lyft are able to provide service as shuttle entities and they are successful in the procurement process, they would operate for us not as a shared ride service, but as a shuttle that ties into a transit network. I think there may have been some confusion after the article. So just wanted to bring that up, that we are really good in our lane, and our lane is where we are staying. We'd also had some recommendations and direction from the last board meeting to sit down with our friends at Sunshine Line. I'm happy to report that our staffs are currently evaluating some service in the Branton area to look at what better use we can make of vehicles between the agencies and get folks to their dialysis centers maybe a little more effectively. Between the two of us, whoever can provide this service well at the lowest cost should be providing it. So if Sunshine Line is saving money by us picking up service, but it's expensive, we're still wasting taxpayer resources. So we've identified some areas. By the end of May, we should have some pilots for further coordination between Sunshine Line and HART, and we're excited to have those conversations. Along the same lines, last week we hosted a Open Doors Initiative sensitivity training workshop. between the PTC and HART, and it was for our paratransit operators and cab company operators as well, and anyone who wanted to come. It was a truly open to focus more on our sensitivity training. So we anticipate seeing some good stuff from that. Some other things you'll hear about on paratransit, we're fully migrating this month to paperless manifests. That lets us be more dynamic in scheduling, so it's a little easier to meet the needs across the county. And finally, on that topic, we are bringing on board May 18th a Director of Operations Support. The candidate that we're doing the vetting right now, finalizing all our work, has extensive contracting experience, so he can handle these pilot programs, also knows Hillsborough County, and has extensive ADA training. So we'll have another asset who can really focus on what we're doing and getting out the door. One program he's very fond of is a secret shopper program that works very well for us on fixed route, but since paratransit is booking every single trip, it's hard to sneak a secret shopper onto our vans. So we're including vans in our further solicitations this year for customer surveys. So there's a lot going on with paratransit. We've been doing a lot collaboration-wise. You should be getting an update 2 weeks at the FGA on bus tollway possibilities, working with THEA. So we're vetting the final issues on that. The board had voted 2 years ago to direct us to proceed in that way, so we'd like to bring you an update on what we're doing. We've been meeting a lot with our friends at PSTA as well, and I believe we're trying to pull a location for June for PSTA's executive committee and our board officers to meet to talk about where we are, what is staff doing now, and what are some opportunities for us to work more closely in the future. And then we also have our ferry project. The folks at the county have met with MacDill Air Force Base, and we should start having some more formalized meetings with the county to bring some progress on the ferry program. We're really excited about that. And while we will not be operating it, we are the transit grantee for the funding, which is there now. So HART is deeply involved in this and has worked very closely on where buses would move around to facilitate a ferry. And I think the final thing I have on my list, I believe some of the commissioners' offices and maybe all our board had received requests, some information on some patrons on Route 47 coming up from South County. We also received comments from folks on Route 20. Ruthie Reyes, our COO, and I, and our bus director, Keith Sanders, who is still here, met with the patrons on these routes over at Brugger's Bagels the last Friday in April, no, a week ago for last Friday, to hear more in depth about their concerns. The maintenance issues which the patrons had flagged have been improving with our changes in our maintenance staff, and we look forward to seeing some improvements there. And Mr. Sanders was down in South County last Wednesday morning and rode the bus. We've moved around some supervisory personnel just to make sure that we're catching everything we can catch. We realize we don't want to give a service that's great when we're out there really focusing. The service should be great all the time, but the patrons have been working with us on their observations, and we're getting better service out there, but we're delivering that for the entire county, and we'll get a written response on all those issues out to the board. And that is my list at this point. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 47X
Yes, ma'am.
communication was very critical,
Yes.
especially concerning, they're all important, but roaches on the buses, the customer service, I want to bite your face off, South County bus service. I mean, it's extensive, 7 major points.
Well,
and are you addressing each and every
Yes, ma'am.
point?
Yes,
and will
ma'am.
you be able to get a report back to us?
Before Ruthie left for the international bus meeting, she provided a memo that came up Friday afternoon. I was not in the office to review it. We'll get it back to you. On the particular customer issue, to be diplomatic, the problematic customer, we have very extensive safety rules and regulations and work with the county sheriff's office and TPD. And in this particular instance, like every time we have a report of a patron who is perceived to be a threat to the patron self or to other passengers, we intervene immediately. We intervene directly. The patron in question here had a previous involvement, but not from threatening a passenger, so our safety staff was familiar with her.
Okay.
We spoke with her extensively. We interviewed her. We interviewed other patrons on the bus as well to make sure that what we were hearing from a few patrons was consistent with what we were hearing from other patrons. And our risk and legal folks are obviously involved in that too. So we did deal with her to the extent that was appropriate for the situation and the information that we had back. And the patron also understands that we have to take anything she says seriously. So something that she may perceive as muttering or not a significant issue is clearly not perceived that way by somebody next to her. So that one you will receive a response which will be a little more sensitive to her personal privacy issues, but you'll get that as well.
And the cleanliness issue?
We have recently kicked up the fumigation schedule.
Okay, that's good.
It is a particular challenge for anywhere in transit if people are eating on the vehicles. And you're aware of the maintenance issues that we've been resolving since we did our big change in leadership December, January. And part of this has been modifying some of our contracts, ensuring that we have most engaged contractors, where are we going, what are we doing on the cleaning between the vehicles. And our maintenance staff right now is reviewing our regular cleaning schedule to make sure that what's industry standard is appropriate for the humidity and what we see going on here in Florida, so we can kick it up where we need to.
Okay, I mean, this was pretty detrimental to, and I just wanted to ask you about the Sunshine Line and the HART service. Did you speak about the unified call center and also the unified training that you could do between the two agencies?
We did indeed, and part of the sensitivity training last week involved Sunshine Line operators. When our software that we use to book our trip comes up for its next expiration, we'll be working with Sunshine Line to evaluate if we can't just all go onto the same software.
I think that would be really helpful, and then train those people and send people where they need to be.
Yes.
And then you have a backup system, and people trained on both. Okay.
I just wanted to ask about the ferry, since you mentioned that, and now we've got a new criteria for the TDP. Is there, since we are the lead agency on the ferry, with the grant, are there plans to incorporate that then into the next TDP?
We are the lead on the expense of the planning and construction grant, which was received from FTA. There's not an operational component in that, and this is it's not an unusual arrangement. You see it around the country that the grantee partners with an entity like the county or somebody else. So the funding comes in appropriately. The county is the agency that has a contract with a private vendor and is working with the P3 process. So the money that has come in from FTA HART is working with the county on the administration and expense of that. So you will see the dot for the ferry, and you will see the motion that we have planned in the bus network to feed into that, because it does have an implementation planned within the next 10 years. So you will see that.
Okay. Well, just so I know, we being the applicant, the direct recipient, that we have responsibilities.
And we will do an excellent job with those. We will. And our friends at the county and also at their private partner, we're all on the same page about delivering the best product for the county.
Okay, let's move on then to a very patient David Smith to give our council's report.
Good morning. Before we get into the ad hoc committee, I'd like to update you on something that had previously occurred. You may recall that we were involved in some litigation about a year to a year and a half ago with a group called AFDI. I believe that stands for American Freedom Defense Initiative. They were concerned that we would not allow them to put certain advertisements on our buses, which they considered to be a rebuttal to CARE. We were in the process of already changing the ordinance because we had identified some concerns with opening it up too broadly. Then you lose the ability to filter out things that are not something you want to see on buses. To sort of bring that loop to a close, if you've been reading the articles that Ms. Morrison circulates to us, you'll notice that the New York Transit Association, I believe it's the largest transit association in the country, recently decided to ban all advertising because they lost their litigation to AFDI, in which AFDI wanted to post some messages talking about, their terms, the Jew killers that were advertising elsewhere on the buses. So I think it's a bullet dodged in our case. We have limited ourselves to commercial speech. We are no longer within their sights. Final closing of the loop, as you may remember, there was an event in Dallas this weekend, sponsored by, surprisingly, AFDI. They were hosting a contest to draw a cartoon of Prophet Muhammad. The recent shootings that occurred there yesterday was part of that convention. So just to show you how things that touch us briefly end up coming back in other ways. On a more upbeat note, the ad hoc committee met a couple of times, and there's 9 different proposals that were recommended to come back to this board for greater consideration. I think everybody that was on the ad hoc committee is here today, so can share some of the conversation if necessary. But I want to briefly and try to succinctly point out what the issues are, and these are related. And the first one is to do away with the nominating committee.
I was going to say, this is summarized in
It is.
section 4.
Yes.
There's,
Pages.
there's a summary of each of the proposals, and there's 2 different sets of minutes. It's a little voluminous, so in about 3 to 5 minutes, I'll tell you exactly what I believe transpired, and anybody else can supplement that. The first proposal is basically to do away with the nominating committee. The concept there was that the process needs to be more board-driven, particularly with regard to officers. So we wanted to have, the ad hoc committee wanted to have a more direct process in that regard. There's a couple other arguments for it, but that's the primary point. There was a little concern about the survey. The survey was simply a written document that sometimes wasn't as completely filled out as you would hope, and some comments were made that people would like to hear directly from those who want to serve as an officer to get a sense of how concerned and how sincere and how passionate you may be about that office. So it was thought that process should be at the board level. It should not be distilled and then come back to the board level in some desiccated form. So there's a desire to change the surveys, limit them to committee preferences, and have board elections done directly with the board through an open process. Also, there was a discussion about making sure that electeds are properly or more abundantly represented on the officer group and ultimately therefore on an executive committee. And the concept there was that elected officials should be represented. They're the lifeblood of the organization. They have more fiscal accountability, responsibility because they're elected. They add credibility with the public and also efficacy in Tallahassee, where we need to make the ask. The comment was made, electeds add leverage to the ask, and they need to extend HART's platform and raise funds. On the other side, there were some discussions about the fact that this would seem to marginalize the non-electeds, who are also financially accountable, were appointed by elected bodies, and should be treated equally. So that's a discussion I'm sure we'll have a little bit more here. So that's kind of the gist of that issue. The fifth item was to have the general counsel serve as the person who chairs the election of the chair of the board. And I think the point there is you wanted to have a neutral party who would conduct that election, so it would be, I guess, a process that would allow people to have a freer exchange of opinions. Robert's Rules of Order does allow the presiding officer to continue to serve in that capacity, but the consensus of the committee was it'd be better to have the general counsel serve as a neutral party who's certainly not going to be a candidate. There was also a decision or a recommendation that the committees be restructured. The FGA committee, as you know, is sort of an all-clearance committee, and the desire was to change the structure into 2 different committees. Take the FG&A and make it a finance and audit committee. So you have a finance and audit committee that focuses on finance and audit issues and will be involved with the budget, et cetera. The summaries of exactly what that will be are also in your materials. The other part of that committee will be an executive committee, and it will be comprised of your officers and the chairs of your other committees, and that executive committee will have a little bit broader or stronger authority to assist in the governance of of HART in the absence of board meetings, and also will allow the opportunity to perhaps leverage that authority with the legislature and the other folks that we deal with in our efforts to obtain funding and approvals. So that decision to create basically 2 slightly different committees out of FGA. The 8th recommendation was that the committee appointments will continue to be made by the chair, but the committees will then elect the chair of the committee as opposed to being appointed by the board chair, so that the committees have a little bit more autonomy in terms of determining the leadership within their own purview. And the last proposal was that none of these things would take effect until the next year. That would give you an opportunity to sufficiently deliberate on this, get the policies that would implement this, for the board to make some decisions, provide direction to those of us who have to revise the policies and bring them back to you, and also allow the committees to function as they are currently set up. So those are the 9 proposals, and as you can see, they're interrelated. And but those are, I think, mostly the policy decisions behind them. Director Miller was the chair of the committee, and he may want to add additional context if he would choose to.
I have nothing more to add. You did a great job.
Move approval of the 9 recommendations.
I would like to state that I was a dissenter on a couple of motions. One was, the big one that I had a little bit of heartburn with was the prescription that the executive committee members fill, the chair, vice chair, and the secretary. And I looked back on Sorry, I don't have my mic on. That I think can be hashed out when we do these elections. I just don't like kind of boxing in the kind of the prescription of those officers. The other one, I just thought it would be a good idea to include if you wanted to be, you know, on that survey form that we've always done in December, if you want to mark the fact that you had intentions or the inclination to run, that it can also be, you can also state that desire, and we've done it in the past elections. I think when you're not on that form in December, you always have that opportunity in the January elections. So I was very much in favor of 7 of the 9, but those were the 2 areas where I felt that, you know, maybe we could have a little bit more discussion on.
David, one question. If going through the process, we do not have a county or a city elected, or we don't have a non-elected who chooses to volunteer, what is the process to fill that?
Those are issues that we are going to have to address. It's unclear right now, for example, what if one of your officers also happens to chair a committee? There's no prohibition on that right now. So then you don't have the 5 members of the executive committee. So there's a lot of details we're going to have to address in the process of crafting policies.
The other thing that I, just in rereading these notes, and I was in agreement with election of the chairs and the vice chairs within the committee, but what, did we address or did we discuss the committees where we have 1 representative, such as the MPO representative? Is that still appointed by the chair?
It is currently under the
would remain
recommendations,
so?
and that would remain the same under your proposals.
Or actually, I'm sorry, it's elected, right? It's board election.
Let us get you an update on that specifies we have the committees which are part of the board. So we have the restructured committees as recommended, and separately the claims committee. Then there are the positions which the board votes to place, for instance, the board representative, TD representation. They're not HART committees, but the HART board votes to place these representatives. Let's get you a reminder of that list out there for the next time we have the conversation.
So
we can
if I
still
recall,
differentiate
those appointments did not change.
Okay, but, and I think I misspoke. I think those were positions that were actually board elections. So when we have our January meeting, we would still have our officers, and then we would have the board elect the single representative
Right.
committee
That did not
members.
change. If I recall.
Correct. That is correct. That will be essentially conducted in the same fashion as officers are, and as it has been in the past.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry? Yeah, do we, well, I would like to request that maybe we amend the,
Madam Chair, you can't amend the
I
motion.
can't
You're the
amend the
chair.
motion, well, okay, all right. Well, I'll leave it be. My concerns were stated, and I'll go ahead and call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. I think that was 3. Okay, motion carries. Okay, next on the agenda, or is that the conclusion of your report?
Yes, ma'am, that's all from me.
Okay, Director Melendez.
I just want to make a comment regarding Mr. Smith brought up the issue that we had to face regarding advertising on the buses, and I just wanted to acknowledge his work on that, as our council. And I think it was very important for all of us and the people we serve, and thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I echo that as well. Okay, we have a lot of committee reports in the back and very good information. I don't know, the reports in the back have been getting better and better. Very good information. Public input, we have Mr. Marion Wisdala, who would like to make public comment. You recognize.
Where's the podium? Right here. All right, straight ahead. Thank you.
Welcome. You have a beautiful dog.
Thank you.
Well behaved.
My name is Marion Gwizdala, and I'm here representing the National Federation of the Blind. And like one of the members said, I sometimes feel like a broken record. And I want to start by saying that blind people as a group are by definition transit dependent. We don't drive because sighted people won't let us. Hopefully that'll change someday with some of the new technology that's coming up. For the past more than 20 years, the National Federation of the Blind has been proactive in urging HART to comply with federal regulations concerning announcements. When the Marion Transitway was first conceived, we met with managers who said, oh, here's what we're going to be doing, and we're going to have this fancy system which is going to tell people where the buses are going to be arriving, when they'll be arriving. And we said, well, what do blind people do? They said, well, maybe you could wear a uniform or carry placards with you, neither of which were really acceptable to us. We've been bringing these concerns to HART ever since then, more than 20 years. We've either been placated, ignored, chided, or our concerns have been minimized. I personally have asked every executive or every CEO for the more than 20 years to meet with us. I have, in the current CEO's tenure, made 3 requests, and it's never happened. On many occasions, we've spoken to the manager of bus operations, who tells us we have a few bad apples. In October, my wife, who is also blind, was told, why is it only you and Marion are the people who complain? Neither of which solved the problem. On April 7th, I recorded an exchange that I shared with many of the management of HART with a bus operator who was not making his announcements. The annunciator was disabled, something I'm told cannot be done, but something which obviously had been done. When I was approaching my stop, knowing that I asked the operator I advised the operator that the annunciator wasn't working, and he didn't reply to me. And I repeated it again. He said, I heard you the first time. I have this all recorded, and I've shared it. When I asked him if he was aware of the FTA regulations concerning announcements, he said he was. He was certified in the ADA. I asked him why he wasn't making his announcements, and he ignored me. I asked him for my stop. He said he didn't know where it was, and HART, by the way, doesn't take stop requests, something required under the FTA regulations. When I asked him what his bus operator number was, he said, read it for yourself. And this is not an unusual type of an exchange. These things happen regularly. And I've shared frequently that when HART's system is unreliable, it makes us look unreliable. And we have been working proactively to resolve this issue, and it is not satisfactorily resolved. So once again, I'm coming before the board saying we want to work with you. We will do what we can. We have done everything we can short of filing a lawsuit. And that will be our next step if we cannot work with you to resolve it. It is far better to work with you than to work against you, and that's what we want to do.
Thank you very much for coming
Thank
and
you.
sharing your concerns. Ms. Egan, did you have a response?
Yes, thank you. I would like to speak a little broadly on ADA and the history. Mr. Guasdala, forgive me, I do need to confirm with our general counsel and our in-house attorney. We had previously received a letter from Morgan & Morgan advising us that you had contacted them, so I need to make sure that any concerns I'm addressing don't turn into possible pending litigation. So I'm going to wait for the two gentlemen to give me the eye and tell me that I can or I cannot respond on anything in specific. Mr. Smith.
When did this happen? I've not been apprised of
We
that.
had received a letter in from a lawyer at Morgan & Morgan through the executive office advising us of a conversation with Mr. Wisdall and his wife and advising us that we would hear from them shortly. So we have not received anything legal. I just want to make sure it's okay to have this conversation.
Well, can I
Mr. Guasdala.
clarify?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
A letter was sent to the governor's office stating that they have been notified that HART was not compliant and requesting a response in 30 days. Mr. Oliver has not yet received that response. When I filed my complaint on April 7th, I got immediate response from the Director of Equal Employment Opportunity, who said they would certainly look into this and get back to me, and that was April 7th. So, again, that's
The rule generally is when someone is represented by counsel, counsel cannot directly communicate with that person without communicating through his counsel, nor can counsel direct someone to circumvent that representation. But I think what we want to have here is the dialogue.
Yes.
If people will let me know who it is at Morgan & Morgan, that is the attorney, I'm sure I can get clearance for you to meet with this gentleman and anyone else and have those conversations so we can attempt to resolve any issues we have. Litigation is never good for anybody, even the lawyers, though they may deny that.
And that is our intention. Again, we want to work to make sure that this is resolved because this is important to us. I don't want to get into the details of it, but when you're standing at a stop and buses come and stack 5, 6 long and then depart, a blind person doesn't know there's 5, 6 buses that have parked and which ones they are. And many times on the transitway at Brandon Mall, buses come and go, and we have no clue what they are. And we have missed buses, and my wife and I are both professionals and rely upon it to get to our meetings and see our clients. And when we can't do it, it makes us look unreliable. And I agree. I don't want litigation. That's why I've been working with you trying to work with you for more than 20 years.
And Mr. Guasdala, previously you did travel training and some sensitivity training with HART. I want to say back in the early 2000s, that's correct?
We have, and made a market improvement. And if you ask operators who went through that training that my wife and I conducted, they would say that's some of the best training they ever received. Not to disparage what took place last week, but I attended, and awareness training is one thing, but very, very little was said about what the requirements are for transportation services to comply with the ADA. Terminology was great. However, it's not being filtered down to the operators. When an operator tells a blind person to read his operator number for himself, there's no sensitivity there.
Well, and Mr. Guasdala, you make an excellent point. There's definitely a difference between just sensitivity training, which was last week, and ADA compliance training. And you had stated yourself, when we do training with our operators, they get ADA training on their compliance. The compliance is the responsibility, obviously, of the agency working in concert with the operators. For our board members who are newer, the requirement of the ADA is that all bus stops are announced. The bus stops which are major transfer points, bus stops which are major points of interest, the end and beginning of the line, so Route 8 to Brandon Mall, and then sufficient points to orient somebody while they are on the route. Now, what does that mean? it is up to a bit of discretion, but we typically default to, if we were giving directions to somebody pre-Google Maps, how often would you have to say, did you see X? This is where we are, this is where we're going. We have an operator assistance, which is the automatic annunciator system. You've heard this on our buses. That does not replace a requirement for an operator if there is a malfunction with the annunciator system. Our operators receive a calls book that goes out with every route. So if the automatic system is malfunctioning, there is an annunciator system backed up with that. Mr. Guazdala has brought his concerns to us in the past. In my capacity as COO, I met with him and corresponded back and forth several times on his concerns about our system. He has contacted our FTA regional office and asked them to look into our announcement system. When we have had our friends from the FTA come down and visit, we have received no notification from them that our system was insufficient or to modify it. And we can go back and pull the information, the correspondence we have on record, if the board would care to see that. But Mr. Guazdala takes this very seriously, and he has, of course, spoken to the FTA and said, hey, is this going on? And again, every time the FTA has come down, they have not told us that our system requires modification. However, not requiring modification and someone having a feeling that this is a good, reliable system are clearly different things. So again, with David's liaising, Marco, I believe, will have more information on the specific complaint from April 7th. And we will get together this week, Mr. Guazdala, and if we need some more sensitivity training help, we would be delighted to talk to you with our procurement department's approval about how to get you back in the door to help us out with that process.
I would appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
And I will say, let me just say finally on training,
Yes,
I boarded a Route 8 several months ago. I let the operator know that the annunciator was not working. He said, I'm a trainee. I said, oh, so there's a trainer on the bus? And he said yes, and the trainer introduced himself to me. They had a conversation all along the route for 45 minutes. Not a single announcement was made.
And the automated system was not working.
The automated system was not working, and no announcements were made. And that was a trainer. So if HART is training their operators adequately, why are the trainers not training? Well, that's an example of how it doesn't work.
Well, and again, we'll get back, we'll look at what we've shared with the FTA previously, because obviously meeting the request that they're sending us is not meeting the level that you're looking for. And we will defer to your professional opinion on that.
Thank you
So we'll
very
be in
much.
touch this week. Thank you.
Well, Ms. Egan, I would also ask that you look into his allegations that he made about one of our employees.
Yes,
and
sir.
And I hope you would review that recording, and if
We will, and I believe we're doing that. I believe Mr. Guazdala said he spoke very quickly with Mr. Sandusky, so we'll get an update about that.
And I
too.
would expect that employee would be disciplined accordingly if all those facts bear out.
Definitely.
Last I heard, he was going to be counseled.
Well, it will depend on where it falls within our collective bargaining agreement. We have a very cut and dry system of where we go, but at a minimum, we will be circling back. And not to tip the hand on that, but I'd prefer to see what we have from the investigation. And
Could you
proceed with
bring
that.
that
Yes, sir.
report back to us next month,
We
please?
certainly will.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be here next month. Thank you.
Very good. Any old business, Director Burton?
New business or board member comments, fine.
Okay, new business, Director Burton.
So thank you, Madam Chair. As some of you know, I received word about 6 weeks ago with an offer of admission at the Kennedy School at Harvard. My wife and I took a trip to the Boston area and sort of scoped that out, and we've accepted that offer. And as such, I will be required to resign from my position here on the HART board. But I wanted to make each of you aware of it. My first class is July the 15th, so we're planning to move somewhere around late June and look forward to what that future is, but want to thank each of you for the encouragement and the time here. Credit where credit is due. I never, ever thought about pursuing education this way, but Michael Stevens, I had a meeting with him as I was working on a research paper last year, and as we concluded the nuts and bolts, which I don't think he enjoyed all that much, I asked him about his education. He excitedly encouraged me to look at a couple different options, and this was one of them. And so, to his credit, we're going to pursue something really exciting and new. So thank you guys for indulging me with this comment and for sharing the last few years with me on this board.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Josh.
Congratulations, and you have been a great board member while you were here. So will you be at the June meeting? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, and we wish you the best in your future endeavors. Any, Ms. Director, Commissioner Merman.
Thank you. I received some communication from someone who's actually a constituent of Commissioner Miller's, but his business is in my district, Saul Davis Printing, who have been printing route schedules for several years. And I guess in the rebid, he is a small business, a minority business, and he lost the bid to someone I'm very familiar with called Pride. There's been many issues with Pride. He lost the bid by $345.65. Pride is not located in our community. Saul Davis is. And I'm going to turn this over to Miss Egan to look into, because if we are just basing our decisions on price alone, I think this board needs to be aware of that, because we're going to get more and more communications like this, and I feel like he had given great service, and actually, I mean, printing schedules, his bid was very, very low. So, I just want to help him out any way I can, but $345.65 for a business that's here in Hillsborough County, minority business, small business, I think we need to maybe figure out how we can put some sensitivity into our decisions to make sure that we're not just going with the low bid. I know Pride very well from the legislature. I know that there are different issues there over the years, and so I'm going to turn that over to you to have someone.
Madam Chairwoman, if I might interject, I think we need to be real careful what we say in this context. It's my understanding there may be a bid protest that's continuing, and there also may be another bid that's coming up soon. That's not intended to diminish anything that has been said. I just want to caution us to be careful what we say and do in this regard.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Miller.
To Commissioner Merman, I'm getting older and I have CRS. I remember I did talk to Mr. Egan about that, and if there is a bid process, we have to be very careful, like you said, about what we say. So I think we just need to leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yes, and I can say that we, on this particular instance, we have a very transparent procurement process. We went through the process. We had the very declared bid process and the protest process. Now, having said that, most of our procurement rules, almost all of them, preclude us from giving a local benefit, looking for somebody in our county. We are precluded in many ways from doing that. So what we do, as you're referred, we have our disadvantaged business enterprise programs, and beyond that, Marco Sandusky's office again is very proactive and involved in going out and working with small businesses. I know he's met with Mr. Davis. I've been out to the Saturday morning breakfast group in East Tampa to talk to the small businesses. Mr. Davis made his concerns about the threshold for competition very clear. He's worked very closely with our procurement director. And when we have the opportunity to rotate around, we do our best to use our local vendors, our folks down the street. Saul Davis printed by business cards, which I give out like they're candy. So if I'm in the indication, there'll be a lot of business going back to them. So we, to the extent that we're legally able to, we do make sure that we reiterate being a good neighbor and working with our local businesses. And again, if there is a particular protest on this, I don't want to go too far into that, but we did investigate. We've reached out. We've spoken with them several times about our process and things which we can do to be a little friendlier for local businesses.
Why are you precluded from?
Certain funding sources require that you do not have a local preference.
This
For
is
example,
printing. You have a certain funding source for
well,
printing?
it
that
depends on the
requires
source
it?
of the dollars. Usually the federal dollars prohibit it. I know it's the same thing at the Aviation Authority.
And there was recently big discussion with state funding about some recommendation in state language to give preference to local vendors, and it was struck down as these are unfair methods of competition. However, this is one of the benefits of our disadvantaged business enterprise program, to try to make sure that we're working with our local partners.
Okay, Commissioner White, did you still need to make comment? Okay, and Mr.
I had a
Egan?
separate comment. Although as a small business person, I think there should be local preference. I'm going to go back to my regular topic, which we still have a legislative session that's dysfunctionally adjourned, but they're going to be back. And I really hope that we have a really serious regular plan for education and specific asks. You know, I know you and Commissioner Miller had a conversation with Jack Latvala, and there's all sorts of players, and I don't know where we're gonna end up, but I mean, I still think there's money there, and we should be getting some of that money. And I think we need to have a very aggressive plan about it going into next year if we say this year's an education year. So I think they're gonna be back meeting probably several times over the summer, and any and all time we spend with them, educating them, and the priorities would be very beneficial.
Any other comments? Commissioner Miller?
I think that we have, before the session abruptly adjourned, I'm gonna leave that alone. I think we did a pretty good job of educating some of the leadership, specifically in the Senate, about where we were. They're gonna go back probably sometime in June. I would imagine it's probably start the 1st of June. Depending on where they are, this whole process of the budget will probably start all over again, completely all over again. So it's gonna basically start us from step one, doing some of the same things and even more, and educating them about what we need, because I don't know exactly what that budget would look like. The governor said he's going to draw another budget up to send to the legislature. There could be some problems there because constitutionally he may not be able to do that. So they're starting to eat their own up there. So we just have to pay attention and be ready to do what we have to do. And I'm ready to do what I have to do to help you out, no doubt about it.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, the only other thing is the monthly information reports in the back. Again, a lot of work goes into putting those reports, so please take the time if you haven't already done so to look at that. And then we are adjourned. Thank you.